Hello and welcome, my name is Craig and you are listening to Too Ugly for Radio, the #1 rated podcast on Trivago. Today we're going to be looking at Willy Wonka. This is part 2 of my videos on Willy Wonka, so if you haven't seen the first one, the link is in the description. Now, today we're going to be looking at Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or, as I like to call it, Big Willy's Day Out. Don't Google that, by the way. Porn has just ruined the internet. There is so much of it. I believe it was Charlie Sheen who said, if you deleted all the porn on the internet, there would only be one website left, and it would be called Bring Back the Porn. God, this episode has spiraled fast. Anyway, from explicit content to me breaking promises, this episode is just quickly becoming me disappointing my parents. I'm going to start today's episode by going back on a promise I made less than a month ago. In the previous episode, Willy Wonka, Slavery and Homicide, check it out, links down below, all the cool kids are doing it. I said I refuse to acknowledge this film exists because I would rather sit on a chainsaw than watch this movie again, but this is just too good to not talk about. So apparently Tim Burton's second choice to play Willy Wonka after Johnny Depp was Dwayne Johnson. Can you imagine that? I would kill to see that movie. In a way, I mean, it's perfect. Who better to star in a chocolatey dream of a film than a chocolatey dream of a man? Anyway, now that piece of news is out of the way, back to pretending that movie doesn't exist, and we'll talk about the good one. So, right at the beginning of the film, Charlie is walking past the chocolate factory, when an old man walks up to him and just says, "Up the airy mountain, and down the rushing glen, we daren't go a-hunting, for fear of little men." Then he points to the factory and he says, "Nobody ever goes in, and nobody ever comes out." What the f*** was that? Is he talking about the Oompa Loompas? Is this some kind of warning? What did the Oompa Loompas do? How does he know about the Oompa Loompas? After all, he said so himself. Nobody ever goes in and nobody ever comes out. Did he used to work in the factory? Did the Oompa Loompas take his job? And is this something he's saying to everyone who walks past? Or did he specifically target Charlie to say this to? What if this isn't about the Oompa Loompas? If it's not, then what is he warning Charlie about? The song's about a bunch of hunters who are afraid of little men. What did these little men do that was so terrifying it scared a group of hunters enough that they never went back to this hunting ground? I did some digging, and it turns out that this is a poem by William... Oh, I'm going to butcher this. Allingham. Actually, you know what? No, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable lying to all of you. When I say I did some digging, what I mean was I literally Googled the lyrics and it was the first search result. Whew. Okay. That's a load off my chest. Now, where was I? Yes. Now, knowing the background to this poem doesn't make it any more comforting. In fact, it makes it worse. Much worse. This poem is about a bunch of little people who kidnap a child. And another thing, if you weren't already creeped out enough by this guy who's walking up to children in the street and just telling them poems about children being abducted, he's pushing a trolley full of butcher's knives. Fucking butcher's knives! I mean, I know that in this show I tend to make things seem darker than they really are, but I mean, come on! How was there anything innocent about this scene? I will say though, it does sound quite creepy when you hear the line, "Nobody ever goes in, and nobody ever comes out." But you know, what would be weirder? If nobody went in, and people did come out. Or worse, if people went in, and nobody ever came out. Well, actually, that was Willy Wonka's plan all along, wasn't it? Okay, so from Dwayne Johnson to a creepy old man with butcher's knives, we're gonna move right along on into the letters segment. Today's letter comes from my mum, and she says, "I'd be interested to hear your take on James and the Giant Peach." Hi Mum, thanks for writing in. Now look, we've been over this. I don't know why you still think James and the Giant Peach was my favourite film when I was a kid. I mean, I watched it a few times, but I watched The Wizard of Oz way more, and what if the Oompa Loompas were just munchkins with severe scurvy? And that far-off land that Wonka found them in is Oz. He said he rescued them from there because they were always being eaten by these terrible monsters. And I mean, That makes sense because Oz is full of terrifying shit like trees that'll throw their apples at you and flying gorillas. Okay, new theory. The Wizard of Oz and Willy Wonka are set in the same universe. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, James and the Giant Peach. Look, if Willy Wonka is Exhibit A in Does Roald Dahl Hate Kids, then James and the Giant Peach is Exhibit B. I don't remember a hell of a lot about this film, but I was talking to someone the other day, and they told me how that film begins, and it was just so weird that I didn't believe them. I had to look it up. So the film starts with James and his parents, and they're all a happy family, until his parents are killed by a rhinoceros that's made of thunder. He just comes galloping out of the sky and just murders James' parents, and then he's off to live with his aunts who hate him. What is it with children's books and themes of living with people who hate you? I recently rewatched another Roald Dahl classic, Matilda, and she also lives with people who hate her. But she doesn't have the benefit of living with her aunts or being adopted. Her parents just straight up hate her. So what is this weird theme in books of being raised by people who hate you? Who is the target audience? Is there a huge market out there for children who love books and whose parents hate them? So anyway, one day a man comes along who offers James a bag of crocodile tongues to make his life better. What was Roald Dahl smoking when he wrote this? Sounds like he's taken a few bloody crocodile tongues, you know what I mean. Anyway, the man explicitly tells James not to let the crocodile tongues get away, and then he just disappears into thin air. So the first thing James does is fall over, and the crocodile tongues run away, and they dig into the backyard, which for some reason makes this peach growing on this withered little tree outside grow giant. What follows is an acid trip of a film about giant robot sharks and ghost pirates, and then in the finale of the film, his aunts literally try and kill him, and the film ends with James living with a group of giant human-insect hybrids who are his new family. They are living in the hollowed out pit of the Giant Peach in Central Park. He doesn't have building consent. You can't just put a house up in Central Park. What I want to know is, the man who gave James crocodile tongues, he told James not to let the tongues get away. But if he didn't, he wouldn't have gone on this big life-changing adventure. So, what was his plan? If James hadn't let the tongues get away, what would have happened? There's a sentence I never thought I'd say. The crocodile tongues caused organisms in his backyards to grow giant and gave them human intelligence. Who's to say that Peach didn't become sentient too? Despite Roald Dahl's best efforts, this is a children's book and it does have a happy ending. But this happy ending doesn't tie up all the loose ends, like the Thunder Rhino who killed James's parents. It's still out there, and who's to say that later on in life it won't just come back and murder James as well? Also, this happy ending, it doesn't bring James's parents back. It's not like the magic rhino who took them away came back from some magical thunder safari with them and now they're here to live happily with their son. They were killed by inexplicable magic, but they can't be brought back by inexplicable magic. This is still the real world. Real life isn't a fairy tale, and if there's a lesson to be learned here, kids, it's that death is permanent. So thanks, Mum. Thanks for reminding me of this, and thank you for teaching me when I was a kid that death is permanent and that you and Dad probably hate me. If you want to be in the next episode of the letter segment, then drop us a comment down below. Remind me of other mortifying things from this film that I might have missed. Or maybe you've got a movie you'd like me to discuss in the next episode. Maybe you just want to say that your parents hate you too. You know, I never set out for these podcasts to be so dark. It just sort of happens. And to be honest, it's not really surprising when you look at the sort of stuff I was watching as a kid. Anyway, don't forget to like this video, because James didn't, and his parents were killed by a thunder rhino. Follow the show on Instagram and Facebook, where sometimes I post stuff like polls on what I should do the next episode on. I've been Craig, and you've been listening to Too Ugly for Radio. Peace!